I imagine these are fixable. We'll find out. So as you can see, things are pretty much as we left them last week. We have still got that bulkhead to get out, and then there are bulkheads underneath on both sides, which hopefully I can get out without too much problem. On the outside, I've removed a few more deck fittings, and to try and stop the boat filling up with water, I've just patched the holes with a little bit of duct tape for the moment. So first job is to get donned up with proper PPE this week, and start tackling this second bulkhead with the help of the new multi-tool. So that's the bulkhead that I took out last week. That's the bulkhead that I took out yesterday. That bulkhead at the end just divides the anchor chain locker off, and that's the one that's in pretty much all right condition, but to be honest I want to get it out anyway because I want to be able to clean. It looks like it'll come out relatively easily, though that's probably famous last words. And then under the cabin floor, hold that down there, you'll see that there's a very rotten bulkhead there, and it's the same on the other side. And then if I turn it around, down the end of the quarter berths, there's bulkheads at the top on both sides. So that's the one side, that's the other. Obviously that one's got to come out and be completely replaced. And then there's also that bulkhead underneath, which needs to come out and be replaced. I'm presuming that they are in separate sections or I can at least put them back in separate sections. Cleaning wise, yeah, it's all in some pretty awkward places. This floor here is just, revolting. And there's sort of odd bits up there, which are relatively right actually. There's still a few stray things. That pipe needs to come out. I'm not sure what it was there for, but it's welded, well not welded, it's in place, held in place pretty firmly. But sanding back is going relatively all right. I've had a stab over here. I'm not entirely sure what the sort of brown rusty stains are. Pretty certain they're not rust, or they shouldn't be. But it comes back to the gel coat relatively easily, with a combination of a very powerful long-handled scraper and a combination of that with the sander itself. Now, the only other point at this stage is the headlining. Now, when I took out the bulkheads, you can see this sort of gap here, which feels like gel coat, and somewhere around here should be the mast support beam, and I do kind of want to get in to see that. So I think I'm going to focus on getting the last bulkheads out first and then worry about it afterwards. So it's time to don the old PPE again, get the multi-tool and do quite a lot of chopping and stuff. Well, I imagine that didn't make for scintillating viewing even speeded up, because I suspect all that you could see most of the time was my backside. However, let's take a look at where we are in the cockpit lockers, because I've come outside because it's a nice day and I think I've done most of what I can do inside in terms of trying to get these bulkheads out. So let's have a look at where we are outside. The bulkheads are, well, they're not wanting to come out in a hurry. However, I've taken out a random bit of fiberglass structure there. These things, there's one on the other side as well. I'm not entirely sure what they are. They're not structural or anything, so I'm going to take them out somehow, I suspect with the multi-tool. I've sanded back as best I can. I mean, I could spend hours sanding it back to that state, so back to the gel coat, I presume that is, ready for painting. But to be honest, if this sort of paint here isn't going to come off under a sander, then I think that's probably decent enough for a sandable surface. I do now, I think, need to take the cockpit drains out, which is probably not going to be very much fun because they've been in for a very long time. The hoses are completely solid, which is why I've cut the one on the port side that you see there. And there's still a few more holes to cover up to stop the rain, although obviously since the cockpit lockers are open, that's pretty much a moot point. The trouble is there's nowhere for me to put the camera inside so that you can really see any of this, so unfortunately you might just have to satisfy yourselves with the outcome for the moment, or stare at my bottom for another 5 minutes. Your choice really, but this isn't OnlyFans. Right, a slight hiccup on these cockpit drains. I had assumed, because I hadn't really looked that closely, that they were plastic, but they're not. They're bronze, which means they are originals, and I kind of want to keep them if at all possible. Unfortunately, whilst I can get most of the hose off, these nut there and there on both of them are just spinning the whole thing rather than releasing, so I've got to figure out how to persuade those to come off without breaking them, because if possible I would like to put them on obviously with fresh hoses, but we will see. Right, it's about an hour later and I'm nowhere further forward with taking out these cockpit drains, and I'm in danger of destroying them, or at least the threads and whatever. So I could chop through them. I'm really reluctant to do that, and I might come to regret this later, but I decided what I'm going to do is chop around them. Now I know that'll create 2 holes in the cockpit floor, and more importantly it'll create 2 holes in the hull of the boat, but they won't be very big holes, and I'm going to have to be doing some filling anyway, so I will fill them down the line and then put new through holes in if these through holes on these aren't rescuable, and restore the cockpit drains themselves so that they can go back in place. Drastic times really, drastic measures. Yeah, so 2 new holes that weren't there before, and they're not even the bad ones. I imagine these are fixable. We'll find out. So, all these bits, chopped off the excess fiberglass from the ones in the hull, just so they'll fit in. They're all going in here with this, which hopefully will seep in, remove some rust, you know, some crud, and let me take it apart, as well as hopefully clean them a little bit. We shall see. So I haven't really made as much progress today as I hoped I would have made, but you know what, it's still all progress. Got some stuff out, taken off some random bits, the cockpit drains are out. It's all still moving forward. It's just not quite as productive a week as perhaps I would have hoped. But you know, originally I thought it's going to be what, a couple of hours work to take off all the fittings off the deck and whatever. I mean, I've spent probably a couple of hours just on the cockpit drains. So I did grossly underestimate that side of things, but you know, you live and learn. I think I need to finish off the cockpit lockers because they can go back on, and obviously that will stop quite a lot of water ingress once I've also put in the new cockpit between the, well, the what do you call them, bulkheads between the cockpit and the cabin. That will stop a lot of the water ingress. So yeah, I just need to sort of make a bit of a plan really, and just keep moving forward. Unfortunately, not a massively structured episode, but it's kind of the reality of these things. Sometimes things don't go quite according to plan. Thanks very much for watching.